So we're very happy to welcome Oksana. Maybe you don't need to see me, you can see that I'm having it. We met last year and came to the Writing Center. We're very glad that you did that and read some incredibly beautiful poems about Ukraine and also about being in South Africa. Oksana was in South Africa for a while, connected to the embassy doing cultural work. She's the author of 3 poetry collections and 3 books for children. When she came to the Writing Center, she was very interested in African stories for children. And we've got some people here who are nodding, who are very interested in African stories for children. And she's published in South African anthologies and literature magazines. And you have something in Ukraine that's to do with collecting African stories, don't you?
Yes, I ran a project once before coming to Africa. I ran a project translating African poetry into Ukrainian language. And then we based on this project, we based the next one. It was about the migration and about the refugees. We were faced with our internal refugees at that moment, and we paralleled African refugees in Europe and our Ukrainian refugees in Ukraine. So,
very good.
Yes.
Is that project still accepting work, or is it on hold for the moment?
It transformed once, and then it was not. It was only based on earlier translated poetry. Now I don't run it any longer. So maybe in future we will be interested in. But I think nevertheless me personally, I'm very interested in this conversation with Africa within poetry projects. So you're very welcome to forward any poetry to me, and I will try to promote them in Ukraine.
Right. So I think that's very interesting. It's a lovely way, a take on our theme of writing community, of having poets being in touch with other poets in the world and translating poetry, making poetic networks. So the title of the session is Reasons to Stay in Touch. So hand over to Oksana for a poem or two, if you don't mind.
Yes, actually, I proposed this title, "Reasons to Stay in Touch," because I collected some poems and I saw that they have a lot in common with my thoughts, my impressions, everything I collected while working in Africa, staying in Africa, and breathing in Africa. So I prepared some poems which relates to my experience while I was in South Africa. But I would start with the recent one written after traveling across Europe. And seeing people, Europeans, how they react to war in general, how they support Palestinian movement, how they support Ukrainians. But at the same time, I noticed some fatigue. I noticed that war affects businesses, and sometimes this is about just prices, politics, and not about death, blood, and pain. And I wrote a poem, and I should start with this one. Its title is "After the Snow." When they talk about peace, I will gaze at the snow. The plane will have landed in Warsaw. While the cargo bay opens, melancholic music will be played in the cabin. In a few minutes, snowflakes will be falling gently on our suitcases as they drift along the baggage belt. In a month, flight over Ukraine will be resumed. They will discuss the new airfare significantly affected by leasing and missile defense systems. Still, what a rare occasion to see with our own eyes the country burned by war. Cemeteries bursting their banks like rivers, and rivers, who knows what will happen to their rivers, to their fields convulsing from explosions for years to come. What a chance to be among the first to see the premature geriatric changes, the dim eyes of the lakes on the flight route, shell craters as a new landscape feature, particularly striking in the springtime, as rhytic joints of the hills, they've seen so much pain. One of them will probably add, I hope the cabin will be stocked with everything to help the passengers relax. Some alcohol, some therapeutic music, at very least the kind that's playing now. Somewhere at the back they'll talk about at last some good night's sleep, the content farmers, at last some minimal political stability inside their words, a promise of cotton candy, the Pope's new apostolic journey. I don't know when the airspace over my country will be reopened. How is it even possible when so many of her children now abide in the heaven? I won't hear what they'll say afterwards, in a week, when the airspace over Poland and Germany is closed. I'll be sitting on an old porch somewhere in the Ukrainian countryside, watching a vine waking up after winter, thinking that peace is a curious notion that we can never fully grasp. And the next poem is The House of Silence. And this is actually about South Africa. When I arrived to work at the embassy, my first house rent in South Africa was from a lady. Her name was Tesha, and in Ukrainian, Tesha sounds like another word that means silence in Ukrainian. And this gave a birth to this poem, The House of Silence. The blue wind will arrive in Pretoria long before the jacarandas come into bloom. I will rent a house from a woman named Silence. The house will have everything, including the odors of pets, mothballs, and the grease of frying pans. Everything I could need, from a corkscrew to an old record player. Silence will leave the keys and melt into the dark second last day of winter. To welcome the wind in its delicate blue skin bearing names of missing persons, to come and wipe makeup off houses and streets. To come and empty all the wine glasses, to dispel all the smells and myths. To simply come long before the jacarandas come into bloom, so that nothing stays the same. So that my poems will never grow dense, so that my clothes will be seen as separated from my body, so that the only thing that will be a perfect fit will be the keys to the house of old Mrs. Silence. These keys will be mine, too, for a while. And it was a poem translated by my friend and South African poet Joseph Kwedzi. Because my reasons to stay in touch, and it's to be in touch with people who inspired these poems, who worked on these poems. So I feel deeply grateful to your country and to your people for the best experiences and for meeting many friends there. The poem I would like to read now is A Curfew in Pretoria. It's about the pandemic of COVID-19 when we were locked. We were locked at our houses, and all my social life was just to hear what is happening at the house of our neighbors. In the morning, the landlord, the people who lived there, they were coughing, and in the evening, their great children came to see them, and they were playing and in the garden, and it was the only sounds I got during pandemic. So we were together during this difficult time, but then I didn't guess that in very nearest future we would have another curfew in Kiev, not because of pandemic, but because of the war. And it's very interesting too. Interesting and painful. The Curfew in Pretoria. This poem was translated with help of Patricia Schonstein, and it was published in the anthology Love in the Time of COVID, collected and published by Patricia Schonstein. Who is out on this street tonight? Who is driving or walking around? Whose light on the autumn road hides within old petals and leaves as they spiral down? A bird hoots from the palm tree. The moon mirrors the garden. The guests get up from the table at 7:30 and part ways immediately. Guests there are, but not mine. Anxiety is sweet, and one of us can taste a little of it. How much I want to keep each growing step of our children, every strand of their hair. How I want to remember each morning beginning with love and all our deep sighs. But memory pushes everything out, keeping only this dramatic lantern light with night patrols conversations in a foreign language under the vigilance of a lone owl and the festive moon. Memory is gentle with everything that can't be put into an envelope or into a photo album. It is even impossible to write verse with it. Actually, during the pandemic of COVID 2019, we used to live on Linwood in Pretoria, and our address was King's Highway, somewhere on King's Highway, and this is a big street that runs up and down, and it is never straight. And for me, it was full of riddles, and one of the riddles was why this name, why King's Highway, what king do they mean? No name of this king. And my favorite season in Africa, it turned out that my favorite season in South Africa is winter. I didn't expect it actually when I arrived. I enjoyed so much South African summer, but then I liked winters because of the transparency, because of the colors, and because of the silence actually. Because winter was full of silence, and it gave me room for my thoughts, for writing. So the poem Winter on King's Highway, in translation of brilliant South African poet Robert Barrell. Golden door of winter with nobody waiting behind it. Motionless streets full of emptiness and loneliness. Only me and a dry leaf driven by the wind along King's Highway. The birds' voices in the banana thicket where the sun is hiding, and riddles about a king. Golden hands of winter who have created this world of transparent days and soft humming that have parted the curtain, then opened the window onto the fair view, that have kneaded the dough for the sweet bread of silence, melting in your mouth the way words melt. One of winter's hands take you up King's Highway, the other takes you down. Winter's golden milk from her breasts that are golden too. Every taste brings new confessions about the price of this freedom of living without a name, neither for a king and nor for his court. I mentioned Robert Barrett, and I want to read a poem at Port Elizabeth Airport about my. It was written when I came to South Africa at first in 2017. It was this visit was sponsored and organized by Ukrainian Association in South Africa. Actually, they are more and more active from year to year, and next month they are going to hold a big conference within Wits University tomorrow, together with the university. The conference devoted to Ukrainian and South African scholar and researcher, biologist Boris Belinsky, who worked at the Witwatersrand University at the second part of previous century. But getting back to the Port Elizabeth Airport, when I came to South Africa, at first I was strongly recommended to come and meet Robert Barrett, Chris Mann, and other poets who resided Grahamstown. So my first visit to Makhanda was when Makhanda was called still Grahamstown, and I mentioned this in the poem. This poem was translated by Robert Barrett too. At Port Elizabeth Airport, as I pass through the metal detector, when they ask me about sharp and pointed objects, I will reply, no, nothing like that. I left all the sharpest things behind on the green hills, like the sharp eyesight spined the untouchable elephants at noon, when the earth was greening, showing her crimson gums, like the sense of smell when I was about to sit at a school desk in Grahamstown, next to the girls who'd flock to the aroma of freshly baked bread. What else? The dangerous thoughts, the wittiest jokes, even the hearing, as hadidas were flying back from the swamps at dawn, slashing the silence in two heavy halves, so that now it can be soothed or tuned together. So my laughter and tears will be flying with me. So the night and the sun will be flying with me, not next to me, but somewhere among the luggage where butterflies rest in eternal peace. Pamela, I don't know what is better, to continue with reading, or maybe we have kind of conversation.
Does anyone have a comment from the room? Yes, Josh, come.
Sorry.
Hi, Josh.
That's fine.
But yeah, I'm familiar with quite a few of the locations that you referenced in your poem, and it's just really nice to hear that perspective, that you've captured a lot of the beauty and the tranquility that comes with some of those locations and seasons. Unfortunately, winter is very dry here, but it does have a quiet to it that's really like pleasant for writing indeed. So it was really nice to hear those poems. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Any other comments? Say that a bit louder, Professor.
I'm saying I'm still being impressed. I'm still listening.
Oh.
So there's still more.
Professor, did you hear him? He says he's impressed and he's still listening and he's hoping for more.
Okay, so let me continue then. Thank you so much for your warm welcome. Let's continue then. It will be a poem called The Laboratory of Tenderness. I was really impressed by visiting, first time visiting the exhibition on Mapungubwe. Then I came to visit it many times at the University of Pretoria Museum. But first I was very impressed, and it was first it was an exhibition about how this archaeological process proceeded, and there was a short video about researchers, female researchers who were working with the staff from Mapungubwe collection, and these women seemed like creators of our past and our futures at the same time. Creation power, maybe. So this poem was inspired by Mapungubwe collection and the researcher who were working on it. It's still so early, but in the white lab light, you are already speaking to the lumps of clay that long ago were hot. De facto, the ultrasound goddess of an ancient civilization. While the last bread of this night is still in the oven, and the languishing beds of small deserts are still awakening, and the salty lakes are rubbing their sleepy eyes. It is so early, and the girls like you are synchronously brushing their teeth in the world's biggest airports before their important and unimportant meetings. And men are sitting in their prayer in the airplane descending over the townships. It is so early, but my heart is breaking. My heart is breaking against your broken heart, testing these various thresholds of tenderness, and asks to take a sip from every cup of the next day. To feel the spices competition in loudness, to hear the streets peacefully bursting their banks, the women of northern hemisphere simultaneously sighing and taking their knives to cut the last flowers in the garden. My heart wants to hear you when you are recognizing in the pulse of the pattern below your lens the life of one humanity. You and its great geographical losses, Inquisition meteorites. You and radiation-sick poppies of the empires. You and the tumors of ghettos, you among the other prophets and sorceresses, to see from the airplane window you curing you being cured by the white light. Even if the turbulence tests our unhealthy habits, even if I lack devices for measuring, even if the borders are so blurred from above, but I see you ever so clearly everywhere when flying over the unfamiliar towns and rivers and giving them tender feminine names.
Gorgeous. Yes, people.
Thank you. Next poem is the source of next poem is again the war in Ukraine and its perception. When I was in South Africa in 2022, the war broke out at my homeland, and it was very painful for me. Of course, I couldn't see around, and I saw nothing. First time I saw nothing. And the poem's title is The Throat of Our Sadness. It is translated by Robert Barrell. In the night taxi, They asked what language we were speaking, and we started to sing Stefania. Loosening a button on the shirt of our sadness, just one button, so we could breathe easier. In this country, we missed ourselves, though this country, neither the suburbs nor the townships ever needed us. Since the war touched our home, all the wonders of this land have dissolved. Its tropical birds and trees have flown away. Only the ones familiar to us stayed under the black veil of the news and the darkened movement of our heads hearing airplanes in the sky. We seem so far away from those women who put their children to sleep on the floor of the hallway, women who have learned the rule of double walls. Since the war touched our home, all our memories froze like stalactites in the wind of our imagination. Look, today the moon is so pink. Listen, someone's last dawn is coming. But when we sing in Ukrainian, the sore throat of our sadness begins to heal, though they'd better ask what language we cry in.
Gosh.
What is interesting, I left South Africa in November, and actually before my leaving, I was lucky to visit. Thank you, Pamela, so much that I was so lucky to visit your writing center and to talk to people, to read poems. Thank you so much for this. And since then, since I left South Africa, I still feel very attached, and I still think about images caught from there. And I write poems on South Africa, actually. Absolutely. Recently, I wrote The Tall Trees. I took a motto from Leopold Sedar Senghor. Today is Sunday. I fear the crowd of my fellows with such faces of stone. So I'm reading it now. What brought us there? To the street lined with those tall trees. That Sunday noon, when the southern hemisphere winter light unveils clandestine truth. I keep asking, what? What muffled our music and our voices as soon as we set off down the eucalyptus alley below the golden canopy of trees? Only the whisper, the rustle of wheels on dry asphalt. Only the coin of the sun falling silently into the beggar's palm. It was in a relatively safe area of Johannesburg, on our way to Rosebank. How tall are these trees, we sighed in awe, though we didn't mean their high, but their gift to observe and keep silent, to grow and stay true. They are not of my tribe, not of my blood, thought each of us, lumberjacks and gardeners, commentators of this carnival of life, will never age so well. Yet we and they do have something in common. I keep asking, what? When they grow towering over our graveyard-like lives, when they gaze into our eyes brimming with loneliness, when they haunt our thoughts and memories, when they remain in the pictures taken by love. And thank you.
It's beautiful, Oksana.
Thank you, Pamela. And for the final, I prepared the poem, The Last Letter. The last letter, I read it in Ghana, and due to this poem, we met and we started our conversation, Pamela. And it's the only It's the only of my poems written in English, because usually I write in Ukrainian and someone translates it into English. But this poem, it addressed to Johannesburg, and it was written in English. The last letter. Dear Josie, lying on the same shore as you, almost next to you, I'm suffocating. We were thrown away by a wave during the recent storm, and we're both still not dead. Much more fortunate than those who sailed the ship and did not survive. However, this gasp of oxygen may be the last one. Dear Josie, the water isn't so far, but how can we get back to it? How comfy it was to live in the deep. How easily we moved our fins. The pulse of our joy was never measured. Freedom was never noticed. Back then, when catching popcorn thrown to us from the ships of our illusion, we watched the endless movie on the starry sky, anticipating the dawn. Dear Josie, do you remember how much we avoided being part of the ecosystem? How we wanted to fall out of the food chain? Each of us chose our own depth and the undercurrent. In our languages, we were looking for silence. We learned to ignore the pain, especially that one of strangers. And the echoes of far wars were caught not by us, but only by dolphins. Dear Josie, what are you thinking about when catching these drops of the last rain with your wounded gills? How many times we avoided death on the surgical table or sliding the blade of self-destruction? How many times would we leave the house in the solid darkness of load shedding? Once, at midnight, they called me Ya I can pronounce this, Yasanya. They called you Igoli. We were threatened by our own bravery, not only by robbers and hunger. Yet the real cause of the passing will be a drought called loneliness. Are you falling asleep, dear Josie? You whose life for a time paralleled mine, at last washed ashore. While your eyelids are closed, I look in the sky for a plane. I hope that your golden scales will be seen under the full moon. I trust you'll be saved, while all that remains of me are only these clumsy stanzas written in a foreign language.
Thank you, Oksana. That was beautiful, beautiful. Does anyone have anything they want to say, anything they're going to remember from this session?
Yes.
Professor?
What is looking motivated her to personalize Josie as like, it's like she's talking to somebody.
I think it was a fish. It was almost, yes. What did you, what were you, so I'll say it again, because I think probably the sound. So Professor's asking how, what motivated you to make Josie, do you think it's a Josie as a person? I thought it was a,
Kind of personalize Josie as a person. Like when she started, I was confused, but I was still talking about somebody or what. And so I was like, I wrote a question to who is Josie? And then like as time goes by, then I really understood that she's actually talking about your hands. And then people call it Josie at some point. So I want to know exactly what motivated her to personalize it as a person and to speak and describe Josie as a how should I put it? Like it has emotions of its own to draw to people, and then she just felt like I'm linking to Josie, I'm linking to him or her.
did you hear that?
No, not at all.
Sorry,
So-
sorry. It's is the what mode? All right, he's coming. Here we go.
No, like I was confused at first, like when you were talking about Josie, like I thought maybe you're talking about somebody, you know. So I wrote a question to say, who is Josie that you're talking about? As you're drawing to the end of your poem, I was like, realized that you're talking about Johannesburg, you know, and we call it Josie. And as you were talking, you personalized Josie as a person. I want to know exactly what motivated you to speak to Josie, like as though you understand what Josie really says on its own feelings, but it's just a place, you know, just rumbles, buildings, people walking on top of it. You know, it's like it's screaming, it's, you know, just want to know exactly what motivated you to personalize it.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. I stayed in Pretoria for 5 years, and Johannesburg was for me, Pretoria, it was like a village. We stayed in the Pretoria East. We spent all the time at the office. So I didn't travel a lot, and I didn't taste Pretoria as a city. But very often we came to Johannesburg to meet with people, for some business meetings, to see our friends. And Johannesburg, it was a city for me. It was actually a city. And being in South Africa, I was missing city all the time, because in Ukraine, my place is in the capital. And Johannesburg was so lovely place. I understood that this is a place of maybe not always about art and about education and about universities and about noisy blocks, but it's about some criminal stuff, and it's about unprivileged people. But nevertheless, Johannesburg was for me something I wanted always to go and see, because it was about life. It was very open, and it was kind of friend I wanted to meet. I wanted to see from time to time. And in this poem, there is I describe that we are on the shore of the ocean. Always, absolutely always, in any city, I miss a water. So I need a river or a sea in any city. And in Johannesburg, and in Pretoria, these places, they don't have water, big water. So I imagine this. And there is one more interpretation. When you are flying on the plane over Johannesburg, you see you can feel the pulse of this city. A lot of lights, a lot of lives, and you see. This is always like about ecosystem. This is about connections between people. This is about the power of the ocean. This is something very essential and strong and powerful. So the poems and at least everything, anything we speak about people, we speak about friendship as a friendship or loneliness, and any friendship is in risk of loneliness, and any loneliness promises you new friends. And this is another interpretation of this poem, and all this inspired me.
Yeah, very good. Right. I think we finished the session now. That was absolutely lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamela.
And it demonstrates reasons for staying in touch, for having poets across borders. And because poetry is like a very intense communication, isn't it? A feeling of
it's really very powerful and very strong. And I thank everyone who was listening to me today. It was really lovely to stay in touch. And I was in South Africa. I am in South Africa
You
for
are.
a while.
Your poetry is, and your feelings are, and your words are, and everyone was listening very intensely. So many, many thanks. And we'll try and
Thank
get.
you.
Thank you very, very much. Take care, Oksana. Hope to see you
Thanks.
soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck with your festival.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.